All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We issue. Yes. Good afternoon. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. If only. As we told you earlier today, the Secretary General expresses his gratitude and his appreciation to Ms. Catherine Colonna, who on Saturday submitted to him her final report as chair of the independent review group on UNRWA. The report, which is entitled, and I quote, Independent Review Mechanisms and Procedures to Ensure Adherence by UNRWA to the Humanitarian Principles of Neutrality. The Secretary General is also grateful to the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, the Michelson Institute, and the Danish Institute for Human Rights for the essential research that they conducted. The Secretary General accepts the recommendations contained in Ms. Colonna's report. He has agreed with the Commissioner General, Philippe Lazzarini, that UNRWA, with the Secretary General's own support, will establish an action plan to implement the recommendations contained in Ms. Colonna's final report. In this regard, the Secretary General counts on the cooperation of the donor community, the host countries, and the staff of UNRWA to fully cooperate with the implementation of the recommendations. Moving forward, the Secretary General appeals to all stakeholders to actively support UNRWA as it is a lifeline for Palestine refugees in the region. And as you well know, Ms. Colonna will be here to brief you in about 20 minutes in this room. And tomorrow, Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, will also be here to brief you, and that will be done at noon here, and then I will brief after that. Tor Veneslan, our special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, said over the weekend that he is gravely concerned by the heightened violence across the West Bank. He said that we must avoid further escalation and that attacks on civilians must stop, including settler violence. As the war in Gaza continues and regional instability mounts, West Bank stability is essential to keep alive the prospects of peace, he said. We also have a few operational details, updates to give you on our humanitarian work in Gaza. The humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territory, Mohanad Hadi, visited Gaza yesterday for the first time since he took up his post as humanitarian coordinator to see the situation on the ground, and of course to meet with humanitarian colleagues working in Gaza. He visited sites in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Bala, including a shelter for displaced and a health center, and he spoke to members of the community. He also saw firsthand the catastrophic situation in Gaza and how the ongoing hostilities is continuing to affect people. He spent the night in Rafah, where 1.4 million men, women, and children are sheltering in dire living conditions. They are lacking basic necessity, including food, water, shelter, and health care. On the humanitarian front last week, 16 of our partners were able to provide food assistance across Gaza. That includes hot meals, bread, and flour. For its part, the World Food Programme reports to us that 4 bakeries in northern Gaza have resumed their operations. Across Gaza, WFP continues to provide fuel, wheat flour, and other necessities to resources to about 16 bakeries. On the health front, in the past week, 2 emergency medical teams have been deployed to North Gaza to support Kamal Adwan and Al-Hawda hospitals. At present, there are 20 emergency medical teams across Gaza, including 2 that are operating in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, fuel continues to be distributed daily to water and sanitation facilities, but the quantities continue to be insufficient and inconsistent, including, of course, in northern Gaza. This morning, our Secretary General spoke at the follow-up of the Economic and Social Council's Forum on Financing for Development. He said that while financing is the fuel of development, many developing countries are running on empty, and this is creating a sustainable development crisis. The Secretary General underscored that right now the world is facing an annual financing gap of around $4 trillion to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a sharp rise from the $2.5 trillion gap 1 year before the COVID-19 pandemic. He added that we need a surge of investment to bridge the financing gap and give developing countries a fighting chance to build better lives for their people, as well as a reform of the international financial system. His remarks were shared with you. Meanwhile, our Deputy Secretary General is in Abuja, Nigeria, take part in a high-level African counterterrorism meeting convened by the government of Nigeria with support of the UN Office for Counterterrorism. Speaking during the opening session, she stressed the need to address the root causes that lead to terrorism, notably the lack of development and social inclusion. She also highlighted the importance of rebuilding the social contract, promoting African-led solutions, and fostering regional cooperation and solidarity in the fight against terrorism in Africa. I also want to note that the head of the office, Vladimir Voronkov, spoke at the opening conference, and his remarks are available to you online. Tonight, the Deputy Secretary General will travel to Addis Ababa to attend the 10th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. There, she'll be accompanied by Guy Ryder, the Undersecretary General for Policy, and she is scheduled to be with senior government officials, engage with colleagues from the United Nations system and other stakeholders based in the region to accelerate implementation on the Sustainable Development Goals. That follows the SDG Summit last year, and that is in lead up to the Summit of the Future in September. After Addis, the Deputy Secretary General will stop briefly in the United Arab Emirates, where she will meet with senior government officials to advance action on the SDGs in the lead up to the Transforming Education Summit and the Summit of the Future. She will be back in New York on the 27th of April. This morning, the Security Council held a meeting on the UN Interim Administration mission in Kosovo. Briefing Council member was Caroline Ziadeh, the special representative of the Secretary General and head of the UN mission there. She noted that during the recent months, tensions have simmered, with one major explanation being an inability to address long-standing issues through adequate communication and dialogue, whether this be between Pristina and Belgrade or between the Kosovo Serb community and the Pristina central authorities. Ms. Ziadeh stressed that the full implementation of the EU-facilitated agreements has become ever more pressing priority in order to help alleviate the continuing series of crises in Kosovo. Her full remarks were shared with you. This afternoon, the Security Council will reconvene to discuss the situation in Haiti. The head of our mission there, Maria Isabel Salvador, will brief council members, as well as Khada Wali, the executive director of the Office of Drugs and Crime, and Catherine Russell, the executive director of UNICEF. We will share those remarks with you ahead of time as much as we can. Tomorrow, the Security Council will hold an open debate on conflict-related sexual violence. Pramila Patton, the head of our Office on Sexual Violence, will present the Secretary General's annual report on the same topic. And I want to flag to you the report is actually already online. Also, ahead of tomorrow's open debate, our colleagues at the UN Counterterrorism Committee's Executive Directorate, CITED, have published a report on the outcome of consultations they've organized with civil society organizations that support victims of sexual and gender-based violence linked to terrorism. These consultations were part of an ongoing effort to better understand the gaps, challenges, and ways in which states could improve compliance with their counterterrorism obligations. That report is online, and I encourage you to look at it. Turning to Haiti, the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that despite the difficulties, we, along with our partners, are continuing to support the most vulnerable people. Since the beginning of March, UNICEF, the International Organization for Migration, and our humanitarian partners have facilitated the delivery of 5.3 million liters of drinking water to more than 60,000 displaced people across 29 different sites in the capital, Port-au-Prince. They also distributed thousands of hygiene kits to displaced sites. On the health front, with the support of the Pan American Health Organization, Haiti continues to strengthen its surveillance for early detection of cholera and other epidemic diseases. Also, Carl Scow, the World Food Programme's Deputy Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer, has just concluded his visit to Haiti. He went to Cap Haitien, where he visited a resilience project, including a farmer association that produces bananas, beans, and vegetables that WFP buys for its school meals programs in the area. He He also met with displaced people who fled violence in the capital and who are currently receiving food assistance. Mr. Scow will brief you in person on the situation in Haiti on Thursday in this very room here in New York. You saw that, I think, late Friday or over the weekend, I can't remember when, late Friday, I think. We issued a statement in which the Secretary General said he was closely following the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He's welcomed the agreement reached on April 19th between the respective state commissions on the delimitation of the state border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He encourages the parties to continue the delimitation and demarcation of the remaining sections of the border and to tackle all outstanding bilateral issues, achieving full normalization of relations. And report we found interesting, which I want to flag to you on the impact of conflicts on children worldwide. UNICEF is saying that between 2018 and 2022, explosive weapons were responsible for nearly half of the more than 47,500 instances of children killed and maimed that were verified by the UN in more than 24 different conflict zones. That's around the world. The vast majority of these instances occurred in populated areas. Countries are meeting this week in Norway for the first international follow-up conference to the political declaration on the use of explosive weapons in populated areas, which was adopted in Dublin in November of 2022. This will provide a crucial opportunity to better protect children, their families, and communities from armed conflict. We have a new resident coordinator. Gita Sabharwal of India is a new UN resident coordinator in Indonesia. Now she has the host country's approval. Her start date is today. She brings close to 30 years of experience in development, supporting climate transition, sustainable peace, governance, and social policy. She has served in this role in Thailand and has also been peace building and development advisor at the UN in Sri Lanka, and we congratulate her. Today is International Mother Earth Day. In his message, the Secretary General said humanity is acting like Mother Earth's delinquent child. So good. We depend on nature for the food we eat, the air we breathe, and the water we drink, and we have brought chaos to the natural world, poisoning on our planet and pollution, wiping out species and ecosystems with abandon, and destabilizing our climate with greenhouse emissions, he said. The Secretary General added that together we must restore harmony with nature, embrace sustainable production and consumption, and protect ourselves from harm, creating jobs, reducing poverty, and driving sustainable development as we do so. More information online, and before I take your questions, nothing before I take your questions. Maggie.
Thanks, Steph. Happy Monday. Just a pre-Kelowna question for you. Back in January, when you announced the accusations against the 12 UNRWA staffers, you said that 9 were fired, 1 was dead, and the UN was working to clarify the identity of the other 2. I don't recall if you ever identified them or, cleared that up.
I hope to be able to, I know I've been saying this for a few days now, but we do hope to have somewhat of an update for you from OIOS in the coming days.
But is that an OIOS issue to find out who the other 2 people, see if they're alive or dead or fired or?
Let me try to get some answers on that.
Okay, and then secondly, how much was the budget for this external review that Madame Kelowna just conducted?
That's a very valid question. She may be able to answer that, but I will check.
And do you know, what department that money comes from?
It came from UNOPS.
Okay, thank you.
UNOPS, the UN Office for Project Services. There you go. I didn't know it was an acronym test today. Yes.
Thank you, Steph. I know we've asked this before, but I'll ask it again given the news, and that's, has the Secretary General ever received up to today any evidence from the Israeli government on the allegations against the UNRWA employees that Israel says?
So what I do know from OIOS is that they have been in contact on a number of times with the Israeli authorities directly, and that's OIOS to security services in Israel. As soon as I can share with you an update, I will.
Okay, thanks. And how would the Secretary General characterize this report? I mean, you've given the facts of his response, but it strikes me as a pretty clean bill of health.
Listen, it's a very thorough report, and I think it lays out. I'm sorry. Sorry, it's a very thorough report. It lays out clear recommendations, which the Secretary General accepts all of them, and I think it lays out also a roadmap for stakeholders, which includes member states, donors, host countries, and staff to move forward. And it also underscores the fact that, as we've been saying for a long time, that UNRWA is a lifeline for all of the people it serves in the Palestinian territories, plus obviously in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Jordan. It also, I think, the report also outlines what, from the Secretary General's standpoint, what UNRWA has been doing for a long time, right? And so, I think it is part of our efforts of transparency and heightened communications with donors. Now, obviously, they will have to make those decisions.
The last question, thank you. I mean, the report says that UNRWA has developed an approach to neutrality UNRWA has developed a more developed approach to neutrality than other similar UN or NGO entities. But nevertheless, the damage is done with the countries that have decided to pull funding from UNRWA. The damage is done.
Well, I mean, we do, I mean, you know, member states, like people, can change their minds, right? So we hope that we will see a return of donors to UNRWA, whether it's donors who had previously given, who have paused their donations, or whether it's donors who have the means and have not done so in the past and now will contribute to UNRWA. Celia.
My question, Steph, is about Haiti. Some 20 NGOs have launched a new appeal for France to reimburse more than $100 billion paid by Haiti for its independence. What does the Secretary General think about it? Is he on the same line, or what does he think?
The issue of reparations within the context of people of African descent, I think, is one that the Secretary General has been very strong on and has encouraged all stakeholders to pursue a discussion. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. During the weekend, I think you followed the news that 2 mass graves were discovered in the yard of Shifa Hospital. Another mass grave was discovered in front of Nasser Hospital. It talks about at least 250 in one of those mass graves. Some of the bodies were found distorted and part of the organs had been missing. Are you aware of this report, and what do you say to that?
Yes, we're very much aware. We've seen these reports on various media platforms. They're extremely troubling, to say the least. Yet another reason is, if we needed one, for all of these sites to be fully investigated in a way that is credible and independent. And yet another reason why we need a ceasefire, why we need to see an end to this conflict, why we need to see greater access for humanitarians, for humanitarian goods, greater protection of hospitals. We need to see the hostages released. I mean, it just reinforces all the points that we've been making.
The special rapporteur on the right of health, she said that what is seeing in Gaza is a genocide. Do you subscribe to that statement?
I think on the issue of genocide, we've been very clear that for the Secretary General, the issue, the labeling of an event as a genocide needs to be done by a competent judicial authority.
My last question. On Columbia University, the president of the Columbia invited the police to arrest over 100 students for expressing solidarity with the Palestinians, calling for ceasefire. Do you have any
comment? The question was asked on Friday, and my answer is the same as anytime anyone asks me about demonstrations. We fully subscribe to the right of people to demonstrate peacefully. Michelle,
Sorry,
and then
just
Dulcie.
and apologies if you've already said this at some point recently. On UNRWA and funding, what's the funding gap at the moment? Like, how dire are their finances?
I think now I think my understanding, last time I checked, they were okay through June. They've gotten some new donations from countries that had not given before. But we'll try to get you a financial breakdown.
Okay, yeah, just will they have enough to are they getting enough extras stepping up to fill the US gap, which
I mean, the short answer is no, right? I mean, they don't have enough to work on a predictable long-term basis. I mean, I mean, for any organization, especially a humanitarian one, to say, oh yeah, we're okay for the next 3 months, that doesn't mean we're okay, right? Dulcie.
Yeah, just wondering about Catherine Colonna. Will she continue to be involved in the implementation of this review, or any role
No,
foreseeable?
it's not that I'm aware of. So, Deji.
Two totally unrelated issues. First one, the landlocked developed countries conference is due to be held in June, but last week there's a letter from USG Fatima said that conference won't happen that time due to unforeseen circumstances. Do you know what the unforeseen circumstances are?
No, you would have to ask the Rwandan host.
Is it related to the relation between Rwanda and the UN, or?
I don't believe there's an issue between the relationship between Rwanda and the UN.
Okay. So second, for the past few weeks, there are narratives that China's production on battery, EV, and solar panels are there has overcapacity. Just want to know if there's an affordable price for the world for those three things. Would it be good for sustainable development?
Look, I'm not intellectually equipped this morning to answer trade issues.
Mm-hmm. But affordable solar panels
we do support alternative non-greenhouse, non-carbon centered transportation modes. Okay, unless there's a question online, I will go and get the main act.